Caleb Turner sat alone on the porch of his ranch house, boots propped against the railing, hat tilted low to shield his eyes from the afternoon sun. The land stretched endlessly before him, rolling fields of dry grass, the distant shimmer of heat rising off the horizon and cattle moving lazily across the pastures. To anyone else, it might have looked like a kingdom. To Caleb, it was a kingdom without a queen. He had built this ranch with his own two hands after his father passed, working sunup to sundown until the calluses on his palms felt more like stone than skin. The work kept food on the table and the ranch thriving, but it left little room for companionship. Most nights he sat at this very porch listening to the coyotes yipping in the distance. His only conversation partner, the creak of the rocking chair beneath him. One evening months earlier, loneliness had pushed him to a decision he never thought he'd make. He had written an advertisement scrawled in his careful, straightforward handwriting. Rancher seeks respectable lady for marriage. Must be willing to live remote, keep house, and share in hard work. Honest, steady man offers loyalty and provision. He had mailed it to a paper in St. Louis, his heart pounding as he dropped it in the post like a boy tossing a love note into a schoolyard desk. Weeks passed. Then months. He began to think the idea was foolish. What kind of woman would leave city comforts to marry a stranger out west? But then finally a letter arrived. A woman named Lily had answered. Her words were plain but kind. She spoke of wanting a new beginning, of valuing steadiness over excitement, of being eager to make a home for Caleb. Who knew more about dust storms and stampedes than courtship? Her letter had felt like a lifeline. They exchanged a handful of notes, and before long, the decision was made she would come. Now, on this particular morning, Caleb shaved carefully for the first time in weeks, brushed down his best coat, and rode into town. The stagecoach was due to arrive by midday. The streets buzzed with the usual life merchants hawking goods, children chasing one another, cowhands lounging outside the saloon, but Caleb hardly noticed. His stomach was tight with nerves. What if she looked at him and saw nothing but a rough, weather-worn cowboy? What if she changed her mind the moment her boots hit the dust of this frontier town? At the depot, he waited, hat in hand, boots shifting against the planks. The townsfolk gave him curious looks. Everyone knew the rancher had sent for a bride. Some smiled, some smirked. Caleb ignored them all. The stagecoach rolled in with a cloud of dust, horses snorting as the driver pulled them to a halt. Caleb's heart raced. The door opened, and a woman stepped down, tall, graceful, dressed in a modest traveling dress. Her face was framed by dark hair tucked neatly beneath a bonnet, and her eyes, bright, steady, were just as he imagined from her letters. But then, before Caleb could take a step forward, another woman stepped down, his breath caught. She was the first woman's mirror identical in every way. From the curve of her jaw to the set of her smile, the depot went silent. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Caleb stood frozen, staring at not one bride, but two. For a long moment, Caleb couldn't move. The stagecoach rocked gently as dust drifted around the depot, and there they were, two women, both with Lily's eyes, both with Lily's letters come to life. The first smiled shyly, lowering her gaze like a proper lady. The second smiled boldly, her chin tilted high as if she were daring the entire town to question her presence. Caleb blinked, then tipped his hat awkwardly. "Miss Lily?" he asked, his voice gravelly from nerves. The shy one nodded, her hands clutching the straps of her traveling bag. "Yes, I am Lily, and this—" She gestured toward the other woman. "This is my twin sister, Rose." The crowd that had gathered to watch the bride's arrival let out a collective murmur. "Twins!" someone whispered, while another chuckled. "Looks like Turner's ranch will be lively now." Caleb's mouth went dry. He had been prepared for one bride, not two. He tried to hide his surprise, but his pulse hammered in his ears. I didn't know you had a sister," he said carefully. Rose stepped forward, her smile confident, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "That's because I didn't give her a choice about telling you," she said. "Lily may have written the letters, but I wasn't about to let her travel across the country alone. If she was going to marry a cowboy, then I was coming along to make sure you were decent." Caleb stiffened at her bluntness, unsure if he should feel offended or grateful. He turned to Lily, who flushed. Looking embarrassed, "I had every intention of telling you in my next letter," Lily said softly. "But Rose insisted we leave before I could." "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner." Caleb rubbed at the back of his neck. The entire town seemed to be leaning closer, eager for the show. He cleared his throat and forced a steady voice. "Well, I can't rightly say I expected to, but you're both welcome here until we sort matters out. My ranch isn't grand, but it's honest work and an honest home." Lily's shoulders relaxed at his kindness. But Rose arched a brow as though she were testing him. The depot master barked at a boy to unload their trunks, and Caleb stepped forward to take Lily's bag. Rose held hers out too with a pointed look, and though Caleb hesitated, he took it as well, feeling suddenly as though he had been saddled with more than luggage. The ride back to the ranch was uneasy. Lily sat quietly, her hands folded neatly, her eyes on the horizon. Rose, on the other hand, filled the silence with questions. "How many cattle do you run? Do you drink? Do you gamble? What do you expect of a wife obedience or partnership?" Caleb tightened his grip on the reins. "You've got a sharp tongue for a guest," he muttered. Rose smirked. "And you've got a short temper for a man trying to impress his bride." Lily looked horrified at her sister's brazenness, whispering, "Rose, please." But Caleb couldn't help the faint twitch of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't sure if Rose was trying to protect Lily or to test him, but either way, it was working. When they arrived at the ranch, Caleb helped them down from the wagon. The house looked plain against the wide sky, but he had swept the floors and laid fresh linens in preparation for Lily. Now he realized, with a pang, he'd have to accommodate 2 women instead of 1 as the sisters stepped inside. Caleb lingered on the porch, running a hand over his jaw. 1 woman had answered his call for companionship, but 2 had come. 1 quiet and gentle, the other fiery and sharp, and though he had invited them both into his home, he couldn't shake the feeling that the decision of who would truly belong there was only beginning to unfold. Caleb had imagined welcoming 1 woman into his home, easing her into the rhythm of ranch life, and perhaps, if Providence was kind, building trust that could grow into affection. He had not imagined twin footsteps echoing across his wooden floors, 2 voices filling the kitchen, 2 pairs of eyes studying him from opposite ends of the supper table. The first days were an adjustment for all 3. Lily moved about the house as though she had always belonged there. She swept, dusted, mended curtains, and even baked bread on the second day, though the loaf was lopsided. Caleb ate every crumb, praising her effort until she blushed. She spoke softly, asking questions about his work and his cattle, listening with genuine interest. Her presence was like a balm, quiet and steady. Rose, however, brought a whirlwind with her. She rose early, following Caleb to the barn before he had even poured coffee, asking why the corral fencing leaned the way it did and whether he'd thought of changing feed for healthier steers. She wasn't content to stay inside the house. She wanted to ride, to learn to rope, to see the land with her own eyes. "You'll spook the cattle with all your chatter," Caleb muttered one morning as she peppered him with questions. Rose only grinned. "Better chatter than silence." "Silence makes men broody, and you've been broody enough, Cowboy." Despite himself, Caleb's lips twitched. The woman was impossible to ignore. Evenings were the most difficult. After long days, the 3 of them sat at the supper table together. Lily would bow her head and say grace, her voice trembling at first, then growing steadier with each passing night. Rose would smirk, sometimes adding a teasing comment, sometimes watching Caleb with sharp, assessing eyes. The neighbors, of course, wasted no time in gossip. Word spread like wildfire. Turner's mail-order bride came with a twin. At the general store, Caleb overheard whispers of wagers. Which sister will he choose? What if he keeps them both? He clenched his jaw and ignored the talk, but it gnawed at him. He hadn't promised Rose anything. Lily was the one who had answered his letters, who had agreed to come west. And yet he found himself watching Rose more than he ought to, her quick smile, her fearless laughter, the way she challenged him without fear of offense. One evening, after supper, Lily lingered in the kitchen, drying dishes while Caleb stacked wood by the stove. She glanced toward the doorway, making sure Rose wasn't nearby. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Mr. Turner, I must apologize again. I never meant to deceive you." Rose, she's strong-willed. She wanted to protect me. Caleb paused, setting the wood aside. You've no need to apologize, Miss Lily. You've been honest. And I respect that. Her eyes lifted to his, and for the first time, he noticed how much courage it took for her to leave everything behind and step into the unknown. Before he could say more, Rose's voice rang out from the porch. Cowboy, there's a storm rolling in. You'd better tie down that barn roof before it blows clean off. Caleb sighed, reaching for his coat. Lily gave a small smile. She means well. She always has. But she can be overwhelming. He met her gaze. Overwhelming, yes. But she's looking out for you, I reckon. Hard not to admire that. The storm came in fast that night, rattling windows and drumming rain on the roof. Caleb worked alongside Rose in the wind, securing boards and chasing down tarps while lightning split the sky. She laughed through the rain, hair plastered to her face, shouting, "This is living, Turner! Not sitting quiet like a parlor doll. This is the frontier." By the time they stumbled back into the house, soaked and muddy, Lily stood waiting with towels, her eyes wide with worry. Caleb caught the look she gave Rose, half exasperated, half affectionate, and realized that beneath their differences, the sisters were bound by something deeper than rivalry. Still, as he dried his hands by the fire, he knew this arrangement couldn't last forever. He had written for one bride, not two. And every day that passed, the unspoken question grew heavier. Which twin would become his wife? By the second week, the rhythm of life on the ranch had begun to settle. Yet beneath the daily chores, the laughter, and the storm-weathered nights, an undercurrent of tension rippled between the three of them, one Caleb could neither ignore nor name without stirring trouble. It showed in small ways. When Caleb poured Lily's cup of coffee at breakfast, Rose's eyebrow would arch with a smirk. When Caleb praised Rose's daring horsemanship, Lily's smile would falter, her eyes dropping to her plate. At supper, when Lily's gentle voice filled the silence with scripture or soft hymns, Rose would lean back in her chair, arms folded, daring Caleb to meet her fiery gaze instead. Caleb told himself it was foolishness. He had written to Lily, exchanged letters with Lily, promised to marry Lily, yet he couldn't help noticing Rose's spirit, her laughter, her fearlessness in a land that devoured the timid. The town gossips didn't help matters. One afternoon at the mercantile, while Caleb loaded flour and beans, he overheard two women whispering by the bolts of calico cloth. Turner's house must be lively, having two pretty girls under his roof. Pretty? They're the spitting image of each other, but one's got thorns. Mark my words, she ruin his peace. And which do you think he favors? Caleb gritted his teeth, slammed the sack of flour harder than he meant to onto the counter, and stalked out before he heard the answer. Back at the ranch, the tension came to a head one evening. Caleb had been mending tack in the barn when Rose marched in, her skirts dusted from riding. She dropped a coiled rope at his feet and crossed her arms. You're holding back? He looked up, confused. Holding back what? Your choice. Her eyes blazed with that same boldness that had unnerved him from the start. Lily came here for you. You know it. She's gentle, loyal, everything a man says he wants. But you, she jabbed a finger at him, you look at me like you don't know what's right anymore. Caleb's throat went dry. He stood slowly, meeting her fiery gaze. You've got nerve, Rose, speaking plain like that. She tilted her chin. Better plain than false. Do you mean to string us both along? Or are you too much of a coward to admit what you feel? The words struck harder than he cared to admit. He stepped closer, his voice low. What I feel doesn't matter. I wrote to Lily. I asked for her hand. That's the end of it. Rose's lips parted, her defiance faltering for just a moment. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out, her skirt brushing hay from the floor. Caleb sank onto the hay bale, running a hand over his face. His heart hammered in his chest. Not from anger, but from the dangerous truth in her words. That night at supper, Lily sensed something had shifted. She glanced between her sister's stiff silence and Caleb's brooding stare. After the meal, she quietly asked Caleb to walk with her beneath the stars. They strolled in silence until she stopped near the corral fence, folding her hands before her. Her voice trembled, though her words were steady. Mr. Turner, I know Rose can be brash, but I need to ask you. Is your heart torn? Caleb stiffened. Her honesty was sharper than Rose's fire. He searched her eyes, saw the hurt behind her question, and his chest ached. "Lily," he said softly, "I gave my word to you. That's what matters." She nodded slowly, though tears glistened in her eyes. A word means little if the heart behind it is elsewhere. Her words haunted him long after she returned to the house. That night, as the twins slept in their shared room and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, Caleb lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling. The ranch had been lonely before, but now it was alive with voices, warmth, and possibilities. Yet it was also heavy with expectation, and the truth he dared not speak. He didn't know if he wanted the gentle promise of Lily or the wildfire of Rose. The tension in Caleb's ranch house had grown as thick as summer heat. Every glance, every word, every silence between the three of them carried an edge. Lily worked harder than ever, as if scrubbing and sewing could stitch together what was fraying. Rose grew bolder, testing Caleb's patience with her sharp remarks and fearless independence. And Caleb himself, he walked through his own home like a man carrying a live coal in his chest, afraid to drop it, afraid to keep holding on. The breaking point came one Saturday evening. The day had been long with branding cattle, and Caleb's shoulders ached from work. When he returned to the house, he found Lily setting supper on the table: roast chicken, biscuits, beans. Rose lounged near the doorway, dust on her dress. Having spent most of the day riding the far pasture, Lily's face brightened when she saw Caleb. "You must be worn out," she said gently. "I saved the choicest piece for you." She placed the tender breast of the chicken onto his plate with a shy smile. Before Caleb could thank her, Rose's laugh cut through the air. "You saved the breast for him? That's your grand gesture?" She sauntered into the room, eyes glittering. "He's been working cattle since sunup. Lily, a man like him needs more than polite little favors. He needs a partner who'll stand shoulder to shoulder with him." The smile faded from Lily's face, her hands trembling as she set down the dish. "Rose, please." "No," Rose pressed, her voice rising. "You coddle him like he's fragile? He doesn't need coddling, he needs honesty. He needs someone who'll challenge him." Caleb slammed his hand on the table. The dishes rattled, the chicken knife clattered against the plate. "Enough," he barked out. The room went still. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Rose's chin lifted in defiance. Caleb stood, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. He looked between the two women, so alike in face, yet so different in heart. His voice was low, rough with weariness. "This house ain't a battlefield, and I won't have it turned into one. Lily, you've shown nothing but kindness. Rose, you've got fire, and I respect that. But if you can't live here without tearing each other down, then I'll put you both on the next stage back east." The words fell like a hammer. Lily gasped softly, her tears spilling. "You'd send us away?" Rose's bravado cracked for the first time. "You wouldn't dare." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Don't test me. I came here tonight hungry for supper, not to referee a war." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Lily fled the table, covering her face with her apron as she disappeared into the bedroom. Rose stood frozen, her chest heaving, then spun and stormed out the door into the night. Caleb remained standing, his fists clenched, his breath ragged. He had never felt so torn, so powerless. He hadn't meant the threat, not truly. He couldn't bring himself to send them away. But he also couldn't live another day in a house divided. Later that night, he found Lily sitting at the edge of her bed, a small Bible open on her lap. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "I don't want to fight with her, Mr. Turner. She's my sister. She's always been stronger, louder, braver. I thought perhaps here on this ranch she might quiet down. But she won't. She can't. It's who she is." Caleb nodded, his chest aching. "And you, Lily? Who are you, beneath all that gentleness?" Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering in the lamplight. "A woman who came here for love? A woman who doesn't want to lose before she's even begun?" Outside, the screen door banged shut. Rose had returned from her stormy walk, her silhouette sharp against the moonlight. Caleb realized with a sinking heart that tomorrow would bring no peace unless something changed. The sisters' rivalry had reached its breaking point. And unless Caleb found a way to mend it, someone, perhaps all of them, would end up heartbroken. The next day dawned with a heavy stillness. Even the cattle seemed restless, their lowing carrying across the dry fields like a warning. Caleb saddled his horse at first light, hoping hard work would quiet the storm brewing inside his house. But no matter how many fence posts he repaired or how many calves he branded, his mind refused to let him be. By midday, he spotted Rose walking across the pasture, skirts hitched in one hand, boots caked with mud. She strode toward him like she had every right to be there, bold as ever. Caleb muttered under his breath, wishing she'd stay in the house where Lily needed her. But part of him knew the truth. Rose had come not just for her sister's sake, but for her own. "Cowboy," she called, stopping just short of him. Her eyes glimmered in the hot sun. "Are you going to avoid me forever?" He straightened from the fence post, jaw tight. "I ain't avoiding you. I'm working," she smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Working's just your way of hiding," Caleb bristled, turning back to his tools. But Rose stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You meant what you said last night, didn't you? You'd send us away if it comes to it." He met her gaze, his own eyes hard. "I can't live with two women tearing each other apart under my roof." "I won't." For once, Rose didn't fire back with a sharp retort. She stood quiet, her hands twisting in her skirts. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "You think I fight with Lily because I hate her? I don't. I fight because I love her. She's good. Too good for a hard life? I swore I'd protect her, even if it meant making myself the villain." Caleb's chest tightened. He hadn't expected honesty, least of all from her. "Then why do you look at me the way you do?" he asked before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Rose's breath caught, and for the first time she seemed at a loss. She stepped closer, so close he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Because I can't help it," she whispered. Caleb's pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to remember his promise to Lily, but Rose's nearness, her fire, the way she bared her truth without fear, it pulled at him like a current too strong to fight. His hand twitched at his side. One move, one slip, and he'd betray not only Lily, but himself. Caleb tore his gaze away, stepping back so abruptly it startled her. His voice came rough, strained. "Stop, Rose. Don't make this harder than it already is." Her jaw trembled, though she masked it with defiance. "You think ignoring this will make it go away? You think marrying Lily will kill what you feel for me?" Caleb's throat burned. "What I feel don't matter. What matters is the vow I gave. Lily deserves better than a man who can't keep his word." For a long heartbeat, neither moved. The wind stirred the grass, carrying the weight of unspoken truths between them. Finally, Rose turned sharply, her skirts swirling. "You're a stubborn fool, Caleb Turner," she spat, though her voice cracked. "And maybe you're right. Maybe Lily deserves better than you." She stormed off, her figure shrinking against the vast plains. Caleb stood frozen, sweat stinging his brow, his chest aching like he'd been split in two. By the time he returned home, Lily was humming softly in the kitchen, her hands busy with dough. She looked up at him with gentle eyes, offering a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm, and guilt slammed into him so fiercely he nearly staggered. For the first time, Caleb realized the cruel truth. His heart might already be divided beyond repair. The tension inside the Turner ranch house had grown unbearable. Caleb tried to hide it by working longer hours, but the silence that greeted him each evening was heavier than any load of fence posts. Lily's soft songs had gone quiet. Rose's laughter no longer rang through the rafters. The sisters barely spoke to one another, and when they did, their words carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. One evening, Caleb returned late from riding the herd and found the lamps already lit. The supper table was set, but only one plate had been touched. From the sound of muffled voices down the hall, he knew the sisters were shut in their room. He started to turn away, better to leave them to their quarrels, but a phrase carried through the thin doorboards, halting him in his tracks. "You love him, don't you?" It was Lily's voice, fragile but steady. A silence followed, long enough to make Caleb's pulse quicken. Then Rose's voice came low and raw. "Yes, I do." Caleb closed his eyes, his breath catching. He shouldn't be listening. But his boots felt nailed to the floor. Inside, Rose continued, her tone sharper now. I never meant for it to happen. You're the one he wrote to, the one who came here for him. But every day I've watched the way he works, the way he shoulders everything alone. And I couldn't stop myself. Lily's reply was thick with hurt. You knew. And still you let it grow? Rose's words tumbled out, fierce and desperate. Because for once I wanted something for myself. My whole life I've lived for you, protecting you, speaking for you, fighting anyone who dared look down on you. You're the sweet one, Lily, the gentle one. People love you without question. But me? I'm the thorn. And now, for once I wanted to be chosen, the sound of quiet sobbing broke through the door. Lily's, Caleb guessed, though it could have been Rose's too, when Lily finally spoke again. Her voice was barely above a whisper. And what of me, Rose? I came across the country for a man who promised me a life. A man I thought might love me. Do you mean to steal him away? The air crackled with Rose's hesitation. Then she said, bitter and broken, if he truly wants you, then I could never steal him. But if his heart turns toward me, would you ask me to step aside? Silence pressed heavy after that. Caleb's chest ached. His boots shifted on the floorboards and the faint creak betrayed his presence. The door opened suddenly. Rose stood there, her eyes flashing in the lamplight. Eavesdropping, Cowboy? She snapped, though her voice trembled. Caleb's mouth opened, but no words came. He glanced past her, seeing Lily on the bed, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight shattered him. Rose stepped into the hall, closing the door behind her. She jabbed a finger at his chest. You heard enough. So now you'll decide? No more hiding, no more playing both ends. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. You'll either stand by your word to her or admit the truth about what's between us. Caleb's jaw clenched. His heart roared in his chest, torn clean in two. Rose, His voice faltered. He couldn't finish. She shook her head, furious and broken. Coward, she whispered. Before pushing past him and vanishing out the front door into the night, Caleb stood alone in the hall, the muffled sound of Lily's weeping behind one door, and the echo of Rose's footsteps fading into the darkness beyond the porch. For the first time since the twins had stepped off the stagecoach, Caleb realized the truth. No matter what choice he made, someone he cared for would be crushed. And perhaps he would be too. The night after Rose stormed out was the longest of Caleb Turner's life. He sat on the porch, lantern burning low, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Lily's quiet sobs had finally stilled in her room, but the silence left behind was worse. Rose had not returned, and every creak of the windmill made Caleb's heart jolt. Hoping she had come back by dawn with dark circles beneath his eyes, he saddled his horse. He couldn't let things lie broken. If Rose wandered off into the desert in anger, the land would swallow her whole. She was headstrong, but she wasn't a fool still. Hurt had a way of clouding judgment. He found her 2 miles out, sitting on a ridge where the prairie dropped into a shallow canyon. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, her hair whipped by the wind. She didn't turn when his horse approached. You shouldn't have followed me, she said, her voice flat. Caleb dismounted, removing his hat. Couldn't let you wander out here alone. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. Then Rose looked at him, her eyes rimmed red. Well, have you decided? Or are you still trying to keep us both strung along? Her words cut deep, but Caleb didn't flinch. He sat on a boulder near her, the morning sun painting the horizon in gold. Rose, I never meant to hurt either of you. When I wrote to Lily, I thought I was writing to the woman who'd be my wife. I meant my promises. I won't deny that. But when you stepped off that wagon beside her, something in me shifted. Her lips trembled, but her gaze held steady. So it's me then? Caleb's chest tightened. He closed his eyes for a moment before speaking. No, it's Lily. The words came slow, heavy as iron, but they were true. Rose flinched as if struck. She turned her face away, but not before he saw the tears brimming in her eyes. Caleb's voice softened. Rose, you are fire and storm. A man could lose himself in you, and Lord knows part of me wanted to, but Lily, she's the one who answered my letters, who trusted me enough to leave everything she knew behind. I can't turn my back on that. Rose's breath hitched, a sound between a sob and a laugh. Always the noble cowboy. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. Rose, this doesn't mean you're less. You're more than you think. Any man alive would be lucky to have you. She wiped her cheek roughly. Then why not you? Caleb's voice dropped low, pained. Because my heart isn't whole with you. With Lily it is. For a moment Rose said nothing. Then, slowly, she stood, shoulders squared as if bracing herself against the blow. Then go back to her. She be crying her eyes out, thinking she's lost you. Don't keep her waiting. Caleb rose too. He hesitated, then bowed his head. Rose, I'll always be grateful for the truth between us. I hope someday you'll forgive me. She gave a small, broken smile. Just promise me one thing, cowboy. Don't ever make her doubt she was your choice. He met her gaze steady. I won't. When Caleb returned to the ranch, Lily stood in the doorway, her hands twisting in her apron. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but when she saw him, hope flickered there. Caleb crossed the yard, every step firm with decision. When he reached her, he took her hands in his, rough palms enclosing her delicate fingers. It's you, Lily, he said simply. It's always been you. And I aim to spend the rest of my life proving it. A sob of relief broke from her lips as she threw her arms around him. He held her close, the weight of doubt finally lifting from his shoulders. Behind them the prairie stretched endless and golden, carrying away the echoes of Rose's sorrow. Inside that embrace, Caleb knew his future had begun, not the one he expected when he wrote for a bride, but the one his heart had chosen all the same. And somewhere out there, under the vast western sky, Rose Turner rode toward her own destiny, wounded, yes, but unbroken. The story of three hearts caught in fate's tangled web had found its end, or perhaps its beginning.